How are things going so far across the state of Ohio this election day?
I'm happy to report that the polls have been open for a long time. 6:30 a.m. this morning, over 3,200 voting locations opened up right on time, staffed by 35,000 of our fellow Ohioans, half Democrats, half Republicans, working well. And you know what? It's been very smooth so far. So, I've been saying that regardless of which candidates win, today's a win for Ohio's voters because thanks to the dedication of these elections officials and hardworking poll workers, we're having a very well-run election in the Buckeye State, and we're going to report those results starting at 7:30 tonight.
And I see you're joining me from the Rapid Response Center. And so kind of talk about what some of the work that's happening there.
Yeah, so this is part of our election operations center overall. The rapid response team behind me is monitoring social media. Oftentimes, that's where we're going to find out about something that's going wrong so that we can work with the Board of Elections to address it. But it's also where we find out that there's maybe false information that's being shared. We can be proactive about that, identifying that, and making sure that Ohioans are empowered with accurate information. We want to remind Ohioans that they can go straight to the source, voteohio.gov, to find out where their polling location is, what kind of ID they need to bring, what's going to be on their ballot. And then, of course, there is all too often people that share things that are maybe intentional, maybe unintentional, but that just aren't true, that may cause people to have concerns about our election. So we want to make sure that people have the accurate information. The team behind me is making sure of that.
And misinformation about elections in particular continues to thrive. And a lot of the time, it's just people that are just going with content that affirms a bias they already have about elections. But one thing
Yeah.
that's true, as you know, our elections are very safe in the United States and in Ohio in particular. And I know Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost, he came out and found only 6 cases, people that voted illegally in his investigation. And so kind of bring people an idea of how elections in this state are run and how safe they
Yeah.
are.
Well, a couple things that you're very correct about. One thing I do want to correct, though, is that, what the Attorney General did is brought forward 6 indictments, but that's just so far. We've referred hundreds to county prosecutors or to the Ohio Attorney General. No one has ever said that's the end of it, that the rest of them are case closed. And so sometimes people grab onto a number like that and maybe take it out of context. But it is rare that voter fraud happens. And that's a good thing. We're going to work to keep it rare by making sure that when someone violates the law, that they face justice for it. I've used the example that carjackings are rare in my neighborhood, thank God. But when one occurs, I want the police to arrest the bad guy. I want them to face justice for what they've done so that we have safer communities. And so, Ohioans should know that they have accurate elections. Ohioans should go to bed on election night, whether their favorite candidates win or lose, knowing that it was an honest result. How do we deliver on that? Again, it starts with those bipartisan teams and keeping each other honest. It's Democrats and Republicans, and they work very well together, but they do keep an eye on each other. It continues with accurate voter rolls. We put a lot of effort into making sure that deceased voters are removed on a monthly basis. We make sure that only American citizens can be registered to vote. This year alone, we've identified over 700 non-citizens who attempted to register to vote. We caught them and removed them from the rolls, and in some cases turned them over to law enforcement because that is a violation of the law as well. We have voting machines that are never connected to the internet. Probably the most fertile ground when it comes to people's conspiracy theories have to do with someone remotely tampering with a voting machine. Voting machines do not connect to the internet. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no LAN connection, no modem of any kind. And then, of course, we use those voting machines to give you that election night result. We want to know on election night. If we had to hand count all the paper ballots, you wouldn't know the result until probably Thanksgiving. But we don't consider that the final answer either. Those electronic results give you, that rapid response on election night, but we also count the paper as part of what we call the post-election audit. So we have electronic results and paper results in parallel, and the two have to reconcile against one another. Again, this is why Ohioans know they can trust the process, and part of our job is just telling that story and making sure that Ohioans are well aware.
Speaking about voter suppression, there is, of course, those things that do happen. We've had some incidents across the country, but here in Ohio, have we seen a lot of that, or have things remained mostly peaceful at the polls?
Yeah, thank God we haven't. And if that pops up, we will aggressively respond to that. As you know, we launched an investigation back in 2020 to an act of voter suppression where someone was sending out a really ugly, racist robocall that was discouraging, particularly people in the African American community, from participating in early voting. We caught the bad guys because we partnered with both state and federal law enforcement to do so, and they faced justice for their crime. I'm happy to say that in 2024, we haven't seen incidents like that. But again, if somebody thinks that they're going to get away with it, they won't. If you mess around, you'll find out and you'll face justice for doing it.
I know we do these interviews around election time and we talk about some of the preparation that goes into these elections, but a lot of this is really happening at the local level in local county boards of election offices. And so how have they prepared this year? And were there any things they maybe changed this year that were different from previous elections, if any?
Yeah. Elections are a very local phenomenon. That's not a glitch. It's a feature. It's designed that way on purpose. Your board of elections is 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats from your community. They run the board of elections. Their signatures on every ballot. The board of elections signs every ballot for the same reason an artist signs their masterpiece, right? Because they're responsible for what happens at that county board of elections. Of course, our job is to make sure that statewide standards are enforced and then to come alongside of those boards of elections to support them. One example that we launched earlier this year was a group that we called our Ready for November Task Force. It's right there in the name. It was making sure that we're ready for November. Now, Jaden, you know that I'm a military veteran. We had a saying in the Army that you sweat in training so you don't bleed in battle. Maybe sounds a little dramatic, but it's a simple statement about preparation. It means that if you do the work ahead of time, when the action begins, you're more likely to be successful. That's what we've done in Ohio. We've identified common issues that could come up. We've worked to build in redundancies and backup plans to make sure that those things don't go wrong. And by the way, that's why I'm standing here on Election Day afternoon, able to tell you that Election Day is going very smoothly in Ohio. Maybe other states have struggles here and there. Thank God Ohio's getting it right. And that's a testament, again, to the work that we've done, but mostly to our hardworking county boards of elections and the preparation work that they've done to make sure they're ready for Election Day.
And it's good that election preparation happens, especially this election where turnout's pretty high. I mean, you're seeing a lot of people that are actually engaged. And so what is this election so far by the numbers?
Well, as you know, we just wrapped up 4 weeks of early voting on Sunday. I'm happy to report that over 2.5 million Ohioans have already cast their ballot. That's over 31% of the registered voters in the state. And it's been a widespread phenomenon. It's been urban counties, rural counties, suburban counties alike. And that's a proof that Ohioans know that it's a trustworthy process, that so many of them have taken advantage of early voting and absentee voting. Of course, we're seeing reports all over the state of high turnout, as we expected. And so the all-time record in 2020 was 5.8 million. We could surpass that today. Not predicting that necessarily, but that would be great news if we did, to have that kind of a record-breaking election. Really, it's up to the people of Ohio, and they've got until 7:30 tonight to get out to vote and make sure that we do, hopefully, surpass that all-time record of over 5.8 million.
And I know here in the Toledo area at the Lucas County Board of Elections, I was there to kind of see the lines for early voting. And I know the lines, they go by pretty quick if you're waiting in them, but kind of speak to that process. Is there really a way to make those lines more efficient, or is that just kind of a casualty of high turnout?
Well, we work with the boards of elections to make them more efficient and to help them get a faster throughput with check-in. But of course, we're never going to sacrifice accuracy for speed. Each person needs to present their ID. That ID needs to be checked and made sure that that is the person they say they are. We flip over the ID and we check the back to check where it says citizen or non-citizen on it. One of the other things that we've done, and this is interesting, we worked with folks like Kings Island and Cedar Point. These are experts at how to manage a line, and they've shared some ideas with us about how to manage lines better. And so that's been some knowledge that we've passed on to our county boards of election as well. But here's the thing. There's this thing about human nature where procrastination happens. In the early weeks of early voting, there weren't many lines, but predictably in the final day of early voting, you do tend to see that on the last Sunday of early voting. Even today, if you plan ahead, you're probably going to see fewer lines if you go at a time that's predictably lower turnout time. The biggest time during election day is right after work, the hours coming up here, or right at the beginning of the day or during the lunch break. And so again, whether you choose early voting or absentee voting or election day voting, if you just make a plan and carry that plan out, you'll be able to make your voice heard in a convenient way that fits in with your lifestyle.
Quickly give people an idea of what happens after Election Day. from the Secretary of State's office?
Yeah, so most people think of election day as kind of that individual experience where they go into their high school gymnasium or their church recreation hall, cast their ballot, and they go home and watch those results come across the bottom of the screen. It almost seems like magic, but it's not. It's thousands of people working very hard, and really post 7:30 is when things get even busier around here. We're working to bring in that data from all 88 county boards of elections. The very first votes counted are the absentee votes and the early votes. Intuitive why? They're already there at the Board of Elections, ready to count. And so when you see results at 7:45, 8 o'clock, those are those early votes and absentee votes. And of course, at the polling locations, your bipartisan teams are shutting down, packing up, getting in a car together. Again, a Democrat and a Republican in the car together, because we always maintain that bipartisan chain of custody. They're going to drive their materials down to the Board of Elections, and probably those election day ballots will start arriving at the Board of Elections between 8:30 and 9 tonight. And then we'll start reporting those. Our election night operations team here is working to make sure that that data is being received accurately from the County Board of Elections and then flashing it out. I often get people texting me on election night saying, "What do you know?" And my response is always check our website, because what we know, the public knows. We share that out there immediately at voteohio.gov, and Ohio gives you the results on election night. And when you go to bed, you'll know those results. And again, it may be later in the evening, but usually around 10:45, 11 o'clock, we're at somewhere between 80 and 90% reported. Many races at that point are conclusive enough that journalists have called the race. But if it's a really tight race, then you may need to hold on until the wee hours when we get all the votes counted. But we don't go to bed, and our county boards of elections don't go to bed until every election night vote is counted and reported.
Yeah, and I know us journalists are constantly refreshing, so we know the website very well. Secretary of State Frank LaRose, thanks for joining me.
Jaden, thanks so much. Happy Election Day.